kinda hot and spicy with a steamy look. It was passed on down by my mother, sweet. She told me, honey, this will be a real good treat. To turn a man's heart into a buttercream. Well, you cook a dish that makes him want to jump and scream. So come into my kitchen.
Come into my kitchen.
Come on down to my kitchen.
Come on down to my kitchen.
I said, come into my kitchen.
Come into my kitchen.
Come on down to my kitchen.
Come on down to my kitchen.
Won't you come into my kitchen and I will feed you fine.
Hi, I'm Chris,
And I'm Jeff.
and this is Down East, Far East Kitchen. And today we are going to be doing noodles, fresh handmade noodles, in a couple different ways. So let's get started. Jeff?
All right, so I'm going to start with just making some simple lo mein noodles. Only 3 ingredients: flour, water, teeny bit of salt, and that's it. And we're going to do them by hand without any fancy machinery, although you can always use fancy machinery if you've got them. And I've got actually hiding under these bowls the dough in different stages of its development, but I'm going to start here just to kind of show you where it gets going. This is going to be a half a cup. I'm going to just do this. I'm doing a smaller amount here. This is a half a cup of flour, and I'm spooning it into this measuring cup, mostly because if you scoop your flour through a big bag of flour, you end up packing the flour into the cup, and you get a lot more flour than you think. And so this lets us make sure we don't get too much. If you have a scale, you can actually do this even more carefully and try and make sure that the weight of the water is half the weight of the flour. In this case, there's a half a cup of flour, which ends up meaning for that we need 2 tablespoons of water. And what I have found, though, of course, is in this household here, I'm now in Chris's kitchen, it's a little drier here than it is at my house. So I'm finding, and it's winter in Maine, so the air is drier. I'm finding I'm having to add a little bit more extra water, so don't worry about that. I always tend to just use chopsticks to mix up flour and water when I'm making doughs, and the reason is mostly because as you do this, as you can imagine, things stick to your utensils. If you use a big spoon, it's a lot of surface area for dough to stick to, and it's just messier, right? And then you always end up needing another spoon to scrape it off of the first spoon. And this way, I've already got 2 things, and it's much easier just to scrape this stuff off. So anyway, I'm going to use this just to stir this up until all the loose water, so to speak, is gone. You can see it now just all clumped up and into the flour's absorbed it basically. And so I can kind of scrape these off, clean this up, and then use my hands to kind of finish this off and just get it compressed into a ball as best I can. And so this is really just a matter now of kind of squeezing this together and getting it to stick to itself. Right? And this is such a dry dough, so even if it sticks to me a little bit, once I start working this, it'll come off and won't be so sticky. Normally, the full recipe would, for like say 4 servings, is actually going to be 2 cups of water, 2 cups of flour, and a half a cup of water, just so that I don't make a mountain of noodles today. We're using a little bit less here. As we said, this is just a half a cup, so it's really just a serving, and that's because again I've got more servings hiding under those bowls that have been resting for longer, so we can kind of see what they look like. But so for this first piece, I'm just going to kind of turn and knead a little bit just to try and get it to stick together. Sometimes what I'll even do is just kind of take the loose bits, fill them in here, and then fold it over just so that it's all together. But that looks pretty good, but you can see this is a very dry dough, right? It's doesn't look all that great, and you can feel that it's dry in your hands. But what we're going to do is let this thing rest for about 15 minutes, come back to it, and then knead it a little bit more. So I'm just going to cover this up with a bowl. So we'll just put it here and cover it. Set this one aside, and then take a look under here. This one's been sitting here for 15 minutes already, and you can see it's still pretty dry. And actually, as I said, this household is dry enough that I might need a little bit more water than I thought I would, than what I usually use at my house. So this one's not necessarily holding together as much as we would like. So if it looks like this after 15 minutes, you definitely need a little bit more water. And this is going to be so thirsty that you can almost just spoon it on here, and it's really not gonna get sticky on you. So I'm gonna just give this maybe 10 or 12 kind of little kneads and folds, and then I'm just gonna cover it up again and let it rest for another 15 minutes. So it's 5, 6, 7. And actually, it's easier when you have a big ball of dough, at least for me, because I got big hands. So a little bit easier to handle. But anyway, looking a little bit better, but I'm just going to cover this one up again. This one then we'll see 30 minutes. You can see this one's darker, right? And it's definitely what happens is, interestingly, the water continues to absorb into the dough or into the flour, and it gets smoother and smoother over time. And so this one is definitely smoother. This has been sitting for longer. You can see it wasn't as dry and craggly as that first one. But it's still a little drier than usual. So even this one, I might sneak in a little bit more water. Not too much. You can see also, if you have a large enough wooden cutting board or dough board to work on, you don't get so slippy slidey as you do on a granite or a solid surface. But anyway, I know if I start trying to knead on that board, the board's going to slide on me. So I didn't bring with me my dough board, but I have this massive gargantuan piece of wood that I bought from a Maine lumber place that cuts down trees and just creates these 2-inch thick live edge boards. But it works quite well. It's so big and heavy it doesn't move. Okay. So that one's pretty good. Let's cover that one up. Hopefully this one now, this one's gone through this process and this is a little bit bigger. You can see this one definitely, so that's after an hour. This is much softer, right? And you can see it's completely absorbed all the water. Their little dry, craggly bits are gone. So this one's really ready to go. And so this is where we're going to take a little space here, and we're going to actually start to try and roll this into noodles, and hopefully this works for us today. And I'm going to try not to add much flour, again, because if you start adding flour, it just dries it out more. As long as it's not sticking, I'm not going to worry about it too much. I'm going to move these just in case I go too hard. I don't want to break the bowls. And so as you probably know, if you've worked with dough at all, you can see this is springing back a teeny bit on me, and that simply means that gluten has actually formed, which is what you want, because it's the gluten that creates the chew. But at the same time, if it gets too springy and it doesn't want to stretch out any further, sometimes what you have to do is just give it a rest and wait a couple minutes so that you can then come back to it. So if you ever made a pizza, you got your pizza dough and you're trying to stretch it out into a circle and it keeps springing back on you, you just have to kind of set it aside, cover it up, let it hang out for a little while, and it'll loosen up on you. All right, so you can see this is springing back, but it's because it's got that gluten formation, but that's what we wanted anyway. We did want gluten, but we may have to let this thing rest just a little bit, but it's getting there. Okay. Got something here in my dough. As far as how thin I want this, it's really up to you. How thin do you want your noodles? For these handmade noodles, I always tend to go a little bit thicker than I would if I were using like a pasta machine. If I had a pasta machine and a roller, you end up with a lot thinner noodle, and that really actually presses down on the dough. For these, it could be a little thinner. This is still a little thick. You can kind of see, I think, on that camera. It's probably 1/8 of an inch thick, and I still want it thinner than that. Getting there. This is actually getting thin enough. I'm starting to actually see the countertop through the dough, which is kind of telling me that this is actually getting probably thin enough to cut into noodles. Right, so you can kind of see now, this is a lot thinner than it was. It's a little thicker on this end though, so let me thin this end right out. Alright, so that's thin enough. Now for the cutting part, I am going to add a little flour just to try and make sure it doesn't stick to itself after I cut it. And to cut this and make it a little bit easier, what I want to actually do is fold it over. You can fold it over just once. I think I'll do this one actually twice though. Just to enough. Chris here has lent me this handy dandy little device. We'll see how this works. Normally what I would do is just use a knife, and I'm going to just try and cut and slide my knife. The one thing you want to do when you're doing this is move your knife. If you just squish down, then these edges seal to each other as the knife squishes through the dough, and then you've got this folded noodle that's stuck. You know, it'll be sealed on the edges like that and it won't come apart. As long as I keep moving the knife, then I get individual noodles. If you happen to have something like this, we'll see how this thing works. We'll give this a try. I haven't actually tried this, so I probably shouldn't have done this on live camera, but let's see how it goes. If I did that get through, it didn't actually get all the way through. It gave me some score lines. We'll try this, go back to the knife. I have an individual roller like that I know works because I can put a lot of pressure down on the blade. But otherwise, just cut through these. And there we go. We have noodles. Can do a little bit of work. Oh, look at that. That did not cut through. Not a problem. We'll fix it. It's interesting, the knife didn't cut all the way through there. So here, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to cheat. There's some noodles. There's some noodles. All right, to cook these, just boiling water like you normally would. Fresh noodles don't take a lot of time. And we actually got this fancy little hopper here that we can add these noodles to, put them into the water to cook without having to dump the water when we're done. So over here, we've got some boiling water. drop these in. You can kind of just give these a little shake to make sure they're in there. And these shouldn't take that long to cook. And then today we're really not doing too much with flavoring them. I think we've got a little bit of butter there just to kind of taste them buttered noodles. Oh, we've got some soy sauce too. Maybe I'll just use some soy sauce in these and we'll use the butter later on another dish. Let these go though for a little bit longer. And I can even feel them with my chopsticks, they're starting to get, in a sense, a little more rigid, right? So as the noodles cook, they get that bite to them, which is nice about handmade noodles. The great thing is, while it may seem like it takes a little bit of time, the active time of doing the kneading is all of 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, 30 seconds at a time, 15 minutes apart in those rest periods. Then you saw the rolling took a couple minutes and the slicing, but really if you think about it, the time it took to boil the water, right, for the pasta, and then you put the noodles into the water, and then they're only going to cook here for about a little over a minute, and it's done. It's going to take you as much time as if you had taken this pot of water, brought it to a boil, and put in dried noodles, and then waited another 8 to 10 minutes for them to cook, right? So it really doesn't take that much more time. It takes a little more planning because the time gets shifted and spread around a little bit.
Yum.
All right.
Great.
What do we think here? Just lift this
So
thing
here,
out.
look at this.
Oh.
They have this cool thing.
Chris has all the fancy toys here.
That's right. And then what you can do is take your chopstick and just tilt it. Yep, you got it. Yep.
Ooh.
There you go. All right. Well, you know what? Let's do this. Cooks have asbestos fingers, right?
Yeah. Some cooks. Yeah.
All right. There you go. Those feel really firm.
Yeah.
You want some soy sauce on it?
Just a little bit.
Okay. This is thick soy sauce. So this is slightly sweet.
All right.
So give those a little toss.
Oh, it is thick.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have another bowl? Do you want some of these?
No, I think what we'll do. Can you taste it?
Yeah.
See what you think. Don't burn yourself. Have a nice bite. I can smell
Good.
it.
Nice bite.
All right. So shall we move on to another type of
Yeah.
noodles?
Let's check out some.
All right.
I think you're gonna do some ramen.
I'll take that. All right. So let's head on over here, and what we'll do is Jeff showed us a great way, a low-tech way of making those handmade noodles. Probably have been made that way for thousands of years. I believe the the oldest noodles discovered were in China. I think over 3,000 years old. There was an archaeological site, and they found this bowl of noodles that had fallen onto the floor of the kitchen. When they lifted it up, the noodles were actually underneath that bowl.
Under the
They had
bowl.
been sealed because of a volcanic eruption, just like kind of Pompeii.
Yeah.
And so they were actually able to figure out what kind of grains were used and how they made the noodles. So pretty old.
Pretty old.
noodles,
Yeah. And I
that's
think
right.
back then it wasn't wheat. It
Right.
was probably more millet, maybe.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So, so what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of the equivalent of. They're not quite instant, but they're pretty fast. And I'm going to use a couple different ingredients here. I'm going to do a mixture to get my texture. I'm going to do a mixture of what we call consui water, which is an alkaline water. And what they've discovered, or long ago discovered, is that by using the alkaline water, you would be able to get that chewiness or that bite. And you can also use egg to accomplish that same thing. So we're going to do both of those, and I'm going to make a couple different flavored noodles here, just to show you how you can dress those up. So here's an egg. Let's chopsticks are the all-purpose mixing implement and eating implement, of course. There we go. So I'm going to I'm going to make a small helping here. I'm going to take about a half a cup of flour. We like to use the high gluten flour. So this is bread flour as opposed to the all-purpose flour. You could use all-purpose, but it's not going to have that texture. And for a little bit of flavor, I'm going to use about a quarter teaspoon of salt. And if you need to go low salt, you can do that. And into the egg, I'm going to add about a teaspoon of this consui water. There we go. All right. Now, I'm going to be using a processor, and rather than going for the feel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be looking for the texture of the dough. So I'm going to add just a little bit here, probably maybe like a tablespoon for my liquid, and we're going to process this. And this is basically what Jeff was doing, but it's kind of using power to do it. And we'll just process that. What I like about this is I can reverse. Really get this mixed in really well. And the texture that I'm looking for is actually uncooked couscous. And we're pretty close here. And when I reach in, carefully of course, what I want it to do, this has little pellets. When I push it together, I want it to form a dough, and I don't want the dough to stick to me. So it's a pretty robust dough. But what I also want is I want to make sure that it doesn't crack. So this is pretty good. So using the processor, I've really kind of cut that time down pretty significantly. If it forms a ball in the processor, it's telling me that it really is too wet. So this is still a little bit sticky. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this back in here. This is really nice and fast how you can do this. We'll just put this back on here. And I'm just going to sprinkle on like maybe a teaspoon or so. I'm just going to just lightly coat my dough, and we'll process that one more time just to make sure that it's not too wet. If it's too wet, our next stage will be a little bit messy, and we don't want that. There we go. There. All right, so it's a little bit finer now. Definitely less sticky. Pick that all up. So there. So we could put this through our noodle cutter and roller right now if we wanted to. But before I do that, I'm going to show you a way that you can make a couple other flavored noodles. So we're going to put the flavor right into the noodle. And let's do one. Let's do a couple here. So we've got the plain, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add another half cup of flour, a little salt here for flavor, and we're going to make this into the Chinese version of spinach noodles. We're going to make bok choy noodles. So I'm going to take the dark green leaves of the bok choy, We're just going to process that right in, and you want to do this when it's dry. Otherwise, it'll just shred it rather than mix it in. So we'll just So what's kind of fun about this is that it doesn't look like there's much going on here in terms of color. But when we add a little bit of our liquid, this is our egg and consoy mixture, go like a tablespoon. So this will take a little less liquid because we have the moisture from the bok choy. So I'm just going to put in maybe another teaspoon right in there. And I can smell the bok choy already. It smells great. And as that mixes in, it's going to give it great color. So see, so that green really comes out, which is nice. And we'll pull this out. There we go. So that's a nice texture. So we have our bok choy noodles. And I'm going to do one more just for fun. So I'm going to add the last of my flour here. And to that, I'm going to add some lobster flavoring. And this is one of my favorite bouillons. This is a Better Than Bullion brand. And what I like about it is it doesn't have a lot of chemicals. But this is Lobster Bullion paste. I'm going to put in about a teaspoon of that. I'm going to process that right in. So this will be good. So we'll get some lobster flavor pasta here. Nice. It's got a nice color. Just got about half a teaspoon there. Again, I'm just going for that that couscous, uncooked couscous texture. Okay, so let's pull this out. So this shortens that process of bringing the dough together. And it really works in the ingredients, which is kind of nice. All right. So let's go over to our trusty rolling machine and let's talk a little bit about that. All right. So I'm going to roll out our first ball of dough here. It doesn't hurt to let it sit for a little while, but it's not totally necessary that you do that either, because you can use the mechanical advantage of the pasta rollers to knead the dough some more, and we're going to do that. So what we'll do is we'll just flatten this out a little bit, and we'll got it on the widest setting. I'll just push this right through, and we'll fold it in half. And so this is similar to what Jeff was doing, is when he was kneading it, he was kind of folding it in on itself in order to kind of work that through. So then we'll start to get thinner here. And what I'm doing is I'm gradually making it so that it's wider, so that it'll be the length and width of our roller. There we go. And you can go, you know, as thick or as thin as you want. There we go. So this happens pretty quickly. So you can see that it can stand to be worked through the machine a little bit more. Get that right texture. This is equivalent to that hard work that Jeff was doing with his rolling pin. Getting it thin. Okay, one more time, and then we'll be ready to cut it. Make it, I like mine a little bit thicker. So and then I just cut this. I'm going to make thinner noodles. And what I like to do here to catch it is I will use a chopstick. And there's some noodles here. We've got our boiling water going. We'll put these guys right in. And we'll just slide that right in. And what I find is that if you just give the noodles a little stir for the first 5 seconds, they won't stick together. You don't have to stir them constantly. It's just that when the water and the dough kind of hit one another, the hot water seals the surface of the dough. And if they're kind of stuck together as the surface is being cooked, they will stick together. And because these are the nice thin noodles, they're going to cook in about a minute or so. There we go. And I cheated a little bit. I've got some butter melted in here. So let's grab these guys. Go with that. Go here. All right. We'll try not to spill this. Too late. There we go. Oof. There we go. My son's favorite noodles, buttered noodles. There we go. Let's see how these are. So you can see they're nice. Again, that consoy water mixed in with that egg really gives these a nice firm texture.
Well, I got the tools to make a culinary score, and when you eat my my cooking, you'll be wanting more. The oven's heating up with a burning fire that makes you never full of my sweet desire. So
right,
if you're kinda
so
hungry, you've come to the spot
let's
where satisfaction's guaranteed and always
roll
hot.
out
So
our
come into my kitchen.
lobster pasta here. So I've got it on the widest setting. Put this through. Do that kneading process. So by doing this, not only am I kneading it, I'm also getting that piece of dough to be the width of the machine. And it feels like it's a little bit wet, and that's because the bok choy that was in here, it continues to release some moisture. So I'll just dust that a little bit with some flour just to keep it from sticking. And we'll put that through. So now we're ready to go thinner. Here we go. And oops. And I think I'm going to make these a little bit thicker. Just going to fold this in half one more time, so if I can get away with it. All right. Let's cut these into the thick noodles. So this is the lobster. There we go. And we'll use the chopstick to catch these. Oh, that's great. Look at that. I can smell the lobster. So we've got our boiling water here. Put that right in. What I like to do is I'll take the tip of the chopstick, I'll hold it, I'll just tilt this so they're all kind of lined up, and we'll just drop those in. Give them a stir for the first 5 seconds or so. All that hot water is sealing the dough. That's great. All right, and what goes with lobster? Butter. So we'll grab some butter here. Oh, wait a minute. What do you think? Tablespoon of butter, that'll be good. They say butter's good for us now. So,
Butter is back.
that's right, butter is back. And these are slightly thicker noodles, so we'll give them maybe 2 minutes to cook up. So with these noodles, with the processor, you can see that I was able to put in the bok choy, put it in dry so it cuts it up, flavor it with bouillon or whatever kind of flavorings or spices that you would like. I've made a pretty tasty lemon pepper pasta that way. So grinding up some pepper, fresh pepper, and zesting in some lemon. It's really pretty good. If you wanted to make a red pasta, you could also put in like a sweet red pepper. If you like it hot, you could put in a hot pepper. So let's let this drain here. There we go. All right, and we'll put that right in there. And lobster pasta. All right, melting that butter. So let's give this a try. Hot. Mmm. So, down east, far east, lobster pasta.
There we go. So I wanted to ask you a question about the bok choy, because I know people ask this about to me all the time. Is you use what people usually refer to as baby bok choy, but then you find in most grocers you also find the big ones.
Yep.
This tall, much darker green leaf, and I don't know if you've looked into it, but my understanding is the baby bok choy is not really the baby plant.
Right.
Right. It doesn't grow up to become the big bok choy, and you can see that the stalks of the baby bok choy is greener.
Yeah.
Whereas the big bok choy, it's a very white stalk and then very dark green leaves, and it's actually a different plant.
Yeah. So it's yes. So baby bok choy is not, wannabe big bok choy.
Right.
Also, there's several different kinds of bok choy.
There's also a dwarf.
Right. But the color of the stalk is also a different species. So you can get baby bok choy that looks like standard bok choy, but it's little. This bok choy that has the green stalk is actually Shanghai baby bok choy.
Right.
So it's actually even different than regular bok choy. And there's other types as well. And the shape of the stalk is slightly different as well.
So really, it's a lot of it is just the English translations. It's easier. We just call it all bok choy.
Absolutely.
Smaller ones became baby, but then there's the ones that are even smaller, so we call them dwarf, which are even other plants.
Yeah.
Although the dwarf really do look like miniature versions of the big one, and I think they are more closely related as plants, but they're different.
And for those, for the dwarf ones, what they'll usually do is they'll cut them in half the long way,
Right.
and then put them into soup.
Yeah.
And then you can, they're bite sized.
Yeah.
So that's cool. All right.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right, so definitely there's our down east, far east lobster with butter noodles.
Yeah. Where's your chopsticks here? Oh no, that's not them.
Here we go.
Here you go.
Over here.
Here, have a taste. Yeah, they get on the bottom. All the butter's on the bottom.
Oh, look at that.
There it is. Oh, just like dipping your lobster.
It does taste like lobster.
Lobster and butter. So there you go. All right. Yum.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it. So catch us next time. And again, you can find me online if you're trying to find me at jeff@needandnosh.com, or just simply go to the website, needandnosh.com, and you can find Chris.
At christoy.net, at gmail.com.
Okay.
Come on down to my kitchen.
Come on down to my kitchen.
Won't you come into my kitchen?
Come into my kitchen.
Come on down to my kitchen.
Come on down.